Nitzan Singer. I'm teaching first grade with Capricorn now in Fred Dillon. And I'm in JCDS Boston and Watertown. And I taught an experiential and hands-on unit on soil. So my unit was composed of primarily 3 components. One was investigating what's in the soil, looking at the different things that we find in soil. The second was looking at the 3 main ingredients found in soil in Massachusetts, which are sand, clay, and humus. And the third was implementing different procedures that real soil scientists use to learn more about the soil. So we used a series of different types of tests. One was just looking at soil with a hand lens. Another was using a drainage test. We used settling jars, we used sieves, and we also went outside and collected a soil sample from our soccer field. So I'm going to talk to you about 2 procedures which I feel really exemplify how I've learned to use student work to inform my future teaching. So the very first example is of sieving. So for anyone not familiar, sieving is basically you have 3 different size screens. You put a pile of soil, we use potting soil for this lesson, on the top when you just sift. And then the sieves separate the soil by the particle and the component size. So for the very first lesson that we sieved, I used this recording sheet. And as you can see, it's not super clear. The boxes are a little bit small. It wasn't super accessible for my students. Where they should have written their responses wasn't exactly explicit. So for the follow-up lesson where we compared this potting soil to the GCDS soil, I formatted a very different recording sheet, which was this one. And I made these minor tweaks and adjustments, and this is the same student's work as before. And as you can see, she had more room to draw. I had them draw their own sieves for this lesson. And it's very different, but at the same time it tells me so much more about what they got out of this lesson. And I feel like this work was connected very much to my big ideas, which were soils vary in their physical characteristics, and that scientists need to keep careful notes and also use different types of tests to look at the soil. So this extra step that I took connects to DeLeT standard 5C, adjust instruction based on ongoing assessment. So I was able to address any confusion and kind of enhance my students' understanding by making these tweaks and making these changes. The second example I want to share with you is about another procedure we used, which was going outside to collect our soil sample. So in our first grade classroom with Yafa and Brenda, we always make our meeting time expectations super explicitly clear. And I wanted to do the same with how scientists take notes. So I made a list of different things that scientists do as they're taking detailed notes. And one of these points is to draw a detailed illustration of what you see. So before we went out to dig, each student received a recording sheet with 2 questions. One of the questions was, draw something that you see in the soil. So before we went out, I modeled this procedure for the students. I drew on the whiteboard what it means to draw a detailed picture. And I found a dead flower in the soil, and I took that and I drew that for the students on the board. So afterwards, when the students went outside to draw their pictures, I have 2 samples. This is one example. So this student actually drew a hole that they had seen with a smaller hole inside of it. They drew the pebbles, they drew the plant roots, they included the spoon that they were digging with, and even the bucket that they collected the sample in. And this example, this is another student, and they chose to draw a close-up of a rock they had seen, and they got the color just right. They even included the little indents in the rock that they had seen. So this step that I took to just model the procedure connects to DeLeT standard 5E, communicates effectively with students. So I used to not always model directions so thoroughly and so explicitly, but now this is something that I always strive to do by providing that appropriate language and that visual support for my students. I used 2 different types of assessments in this unit. The first was having students create their own soil mixture. So before we created the mixtures, we actually had a drainage test where we looked at how the soil ingredients, clay, sand, and humus, drain water. And usually, clay is very absorbent, and it does not drain water very quickly. But for some reason, we had a little mishap with this experiment, which you'll see in a little video clip in a little bit. And the water actually drained rather quickly from the clay. So rather than playing it off as if this was supposed to happen, I asked the students, so we've learned that the clay is very absorbent. Why do you think it drained the water so quickly? And one student in the clip gives a very interesting response as to why he thinks that happens. You'll also see in the clip, towards the end, there's one student who's trying to share a comment, but there are students having side conversations, students are talking over him. So what I do is I stop the side conversations in the chatter, and I kind of have the students give their focus and attention to the student who is trying to share a comment. And earlier in the year, this would have been a challenge for me, but it worked out very successfully in this video clip. So I'm going to show that to you now. What does this tell us about? And look at the results on here. We have sand drained 1.5 ounces in 30 seconds, humus drained 3 1/4 ounces, and clay drained 3 ounces, all in 30 seconds. I want to see some hands. Ella, go ahead. What do you learn about this? Oh, can you wait 2 minutes? Tina, go ahead. Guys. Easy.
That even though we thought sometimes clay it stays on top of the clay for a long time. This time it was the second most.
Why? So it ran right through there.
What happened to the sand?
Yoni, go ahead.
I'm pretty sure I know why.
What you know why? What?
I'm pretty sure I know why. The clay went through.
How come?
Because when the cup test, there wasn't anything leading out. It was just flat bottom. But there it was bottom, and it had gauze. It had more stuff, and it was like a toothpaste. So it wasn't just a cup. It had more stuff.
Thanks for saying that. So Yanni was saying that last week with the cups didn't really have a hole in the bottom. The water flowed in. The water came right in. The ingredient absorbed the water, but not the water didn't come back out, right? But with these, the funnels, there's a hole in the bottom, and the water can come right out of there. So it's a very different kind of experiment.
And because it was squeezing it together, so the stuff would.
Yes, it comes to a smaller hole at the end. Ari, go ahead.
I don't know what happened.
Let's do that.
It's down, and because on the sand, the beach, you see, that way it was like a left.
I can't hear Ari, hold
The
on.
sand on the beach.
Ari, hold on 1
The
second.
sand like sucks it
Ari,
up.
hold on 1 second. I can't hear some side conversations. Guys, I can't hear Ari sitting so close to me. Go ahead, Ari.
So the sand on the beach, like when the waves comes into the sand, it like dries up and is not on top of the sand. It like absorbs into the sand. It doesn't go like on the cup. It goes into the sand.
So you're saying that at a beach, the water comes in from the ocean, and it goes right into some of the sand, but not all of the sand?
It goes in the sand, but it doesn't go in that cup. It goes in the sand.
So it's a little bit different, right? And there's probably even more water than our ocean. We poured 4 ounces each into here. The ocean has a lot more than just 4 ounces of water.
And it still soaks up.
Right. Exactly. Okay, great observations, easy sit up. I'm going to give you a challenge question now. First I want to show you something. So last week, so as you saw in that clip, I feel like this connects to standard 3. 3B acquires and uses subject-specific pedagogy, and I anticipated the potential mishap that occurred. I also feel that in terms of knowing subject matter for teaching, this is also an area where I hope to grow. When I was researching all about soil for this unit, I looked up everything I thought might come up, either whether it was student questions, just anything that I wanted to know for myself. And of course, questions came up that I wasn't prepared for, such as, what about lava? What happens when lava shoots up through the soil? So just knowing knowing where to go, extending the unit for my students who have those questions is an area which I hope to further grow in. So after this lesson, we then went on to create our soil mixtures. So the first thing I did was I showed the students what ryegrass looks like growing in humus, sand, and clay. As you can see, it's growing very well in the humus, not as well in the sand, and pretty poorly in the clay. So we then, using this information, as well as what they learned about the ingredients, they then created their own soil mixtures and grew grass in them, and this is a few different samples of student work. Another type of assessment, oh, and I also encourage you to come up later to look, I also asked them to tell me reasons as to why they chose the amounts of the ingredients that they did, and they're up here for you to look at. So for my final assessment, I purposely left it very similar to the pre-assessment. I wanted to have a very clear picture of the before and after in terms of what the student had gained and what they had learned in my unit. So these are three examples. So the top is the before from the pre-assessment, the bottom is from the after. So this student, they included what's in the humus, rod and leaves, rocks, tree roots. They separated the soil by the 3 layers we had learned about. This student, I love this one, it's very interesting. She included the 3 layers, which we had learned about. We had also learned that coral makes up sand. It can break down into sand. So she drew coral. She drew bones. She drew a dead snake because we had learned that humus is made up of decaying animals as well. She drew boulders, she drew rocks, and she drew the 3 layers. One more sample. And this is the last one. So if I were to revise this unit, I think I would find a way to make it more sequential and a little bit less scattered. I feel like we kind of bounce back and forth to doing experiments, then to learning about the ingredients, and to going outside to compare the different soils. I feel like there was a better order I could have chosen for this unit. But overall, I'm very much pleased with what my students gained from this unit. And just a little anecdote to share with you. Towards the end of my unit, one of the students' fathers had come in the next morning after we had planted the grass. And he asked his son, oh, so what are you doing here? Tell me what you're learning in school. And his son told him, oh, we made our own soil mixtures and we're growing ryegrass in them to see how they grow. And the father said to his son, you know, that's so funny, I've been growing grass in our new front lawn, but I can't get the grass to grow. And the son said to his dad, you know, Dad, it's probably because there's not enough humus in your topsoil. And his father went to me, I have no idea what that means. So I was very moved to hear this. So I'd just like to finish off by thanking my mentors, Brenda Dolan and Yaffa Cornell, for all of their support and all of their help with this. My field instructor, Leslie Baser, and also Neely Perlmutter, my instructor for this course. Just all of your guidance and support as I was teaching this unit. I couldn't have done this without you. So just thank you so much. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Strangely, I have a question. When they were doing the ingredients, if they picked something like just clay, did you try to guide them towards that might not be the best, or did you let them go and make their mistake? And
well, I actually told them before that they had to include all 3 ingredients, because in Massachusetts, our soil has all 3 ingredients. And if they wanted to have like a small amount of clay, they could do like a pinch of clay in their ingredient. But surprisingly, actually not surprisingly,
right.
No, none of the students, most of the students chose mostly humus for their mixtures. So that didn't happen. Exactly.
Yeah. When you said that the student asked you about the lava as a fellow student, so what did you do?
That was the type of situation where I would tell them, you know, it's a great question. I'm going to look it up, and we can find this out together later.
Great. So what is the answer?
I guess it has to do with below the bedrock. The lava comes below the bedrock, and it's more, it would involve teaching about volcanoes, and it doesn't really show up out of the soil. It comes out of volcanoes. So it wasn't really connected to my unit, but I'm sure there was some way I could have brought it in.
I was thinking when we were watching the video how one thing I love about this unit is that it really builds on real experiences. Like all kids have like dug in the dirt, you know, or have played on the beach. And I'm wondering, I'm just curious what role that ended up playing. Like, did it surprise you in any way, or were there times where you could intentionally build on what the experiences kids already had?
Actually, one of our teachers in our school is retiring this year, so they brought in a tree for her to plant on the last day. And during recess, some of the kids had seen it, and when they came back inside, they said, "Nitzan, guess what? This tree is being dug for Miriam," and they dug up all the subsoil to put the roots in it. So they just make it. They find all this real life application for it, and it really, because soil's everywhere, dirt's everywhere, and I can really see it in their little comments that they share with me.
And I will add on to that, they would often come in, "Are we taking today? Are we taking today?" So it was a real strength in the unit that have been digging.
I know you said you were surprised by how engaged they were.
I was.
I loved the combination you did. I mean, I thought it was so interesting. You engaged them in so many different ways, sifting and planting, and you know, I think that is so meaningful to kids when they learn it, you know, in different ways, and then that helps them to, you know, it sticks with them better. So I thought that was great.
I really loved how you had them put their thinking into visual form, both so that they had another way of expressing what they were thinking, and also so that they could see each other's thinking through the pictures. And I'm wondering if that happened in any formal way, but if they saw each other's representations of, you know, if there are other, whether or not they could notice things about each other's work, each other's drawings.
Do you mean in terms of how they've grown with the material, or?
Just whether that was an experience they had in their work in the unit.
It really wasn't, but actually in the video clip I showed you, I don't know if you heard, when the student shares that response about why it might have drained faster through the funnel, one student actually, "Oh wow, great observation." So it was more during discussions, but not so much with showing their written work to one another. But that would also be something great to incorporate into the unit.
Yep. So I've always been challenged by primary student drawings. Like, how do I read them? You know, so I'm curious about how you read them. Did you have the kids talk to you about them? You know, tell me what's here, or can you just really look at that and say, "Oh, I see the 3 layers" or something? How do you read drawings? That's a genuine question.
Do you mean with the pre-assessment and the
Any of them, yeah.
I think something I've learned from Brenda is to just take it and not just put it aside. Bring it home and look through it. And that's what I did with every single recording sheet. I would take it home and I would look at what the students wrote. And I think it's probably better to look at them during the day, so you can ask the students those questions and they'll probably still remember what they had meant when they drew it.
So you did ask them?
Yes, but usually I would bring it home and then the next day I would ask them.
Mm-hmm.
But with the post-assessment, I asked them as they were drawing, "Can you explain to me what you did here?"
I see. Okay, so you did that.
I'm curious if you noticed like variation in their understanding, or like were there ever times where you thought one student maybe their work showed that they were confused about anything, or something that they didn't understand, or students where you were surprised by how much they seemed to be understanding about the different aspects of soil?
Well, I guess beforehand, many of the students had a lot of schema for rocks and different types of rocks, which I didn't really address in this unit. So I was a little surprised by how much they knew coming in about rocks. And they would ask about, we learned about rocks, we didn't talk about rocks ever. So I actually had those students bring rocks from home to share with the class. Is that what you meant by your question?
No, I more meant like when you were, though that's really interesting. I'm actually now interested in that too, and how the rocks ended up coming. but like you mentioned that you took the work home and you would look at it. So as you were looking at their work, were there times where you thought, oh, like I see from this work that the student doesn't understand or has a misunderstanding about soil, or on the other end where you were kind of amazed by how they had put things together and, you know, in a way that was unexpected, or not, if it didn't happen, I'm just curious.
I think one confusion that I did see was in terms of the layers. There's 3 layers and there's 3 ingredients. So I think they would kind of confuse the 3 and the 3, or they would mix them up in different orders, which is understandable, especially because the ingredients are found in each layer. So it gets a little confusing. But I feel like that got straightened out by the end of the unit.
How did you straighten it out?
I think when I introduced the layers, we had talked about how humus is found primarily in the topsoil, and clay is found between them, and then there's a lot of sand in the subsoil. And that was probably where it got confusing. So after, when we looked at the ingredients in just one lesson, I think that's where it got straightened out. When they learned, oh, this isn't the layer, this is the ingredient, those are the layers. And also, what's really helpful about these layers, just the word top, the word sub we talked about, and that helped them remember that order.
And can I build on what she said? I know maybe you're being modest, but in terms of their drawings, the before and after, you can see from this picture the amount, like, it's just different. It looks different physically. It looks like a scientific drawing. It's labeled, it's clear, so everything you're taught, and if you saw in the video clip, this was up in our classroom about what scientists do. So Nitzan made also a visual for them to be able to refer to. This is what we do when we study science. And they're just the pictures in and of themselves, not even the content, but just how they drew it, much more meticulously than just this soil done.
Right. And also with that, in the question it says in the space below, draw a picture of what soil looks like. So it didn't have to be the layers. It could have been just a close-up of soil, but this is what many students chose to draw. And I wasn't explicit because I wanted them to choose how they would draw it.